The hallway was buzzing with the usual chatter and laughter, the noise of students rushing between classes. But in one corner, Elena Thomas stood still, a quiet storm in the middle of a chaos she had never asked for. She tried to slip through unnoticed, her eyes glued to the ground, hoping to stay invisible. She was used to this, being the new girl, the outsider. This was her third school in 2 years. Every time she moved, she tried to leave behind the whispers and stares. But today was different. The moment she stepped into the hallway of Rainier High, she could feel it, the shift. The energy around her was charged. Her heart raced. Something was about to happen, and she couldn't shake the feeling that it had everything to do with the boy leaning against the lockers ahead. Chad Walker. The school's golden boy, the quarterback, and by the way people moved around him, the undisputed king of Rainier High. He was standing there with his usual smirk, surrounded by his pack of jocks, laughing as if the world revolved around them. They didn't see her at first, but he did. It was a split second, a glance, a slight narrowing of his eyes, and then it happened. One of his friends, laughing too loudly at a joke, bumped into Elena, sending her books flying. The hallway went silent for a moment. "Hey! Watch where you're going!" Elena snapped, her voice shaking with anger and embarrassment. But before she could bend down to pick up her books, Chad was already there, blocking her path. His tall frame towered over her, a confident smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "Well, well," Chad said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "What do we have here?" "The new girl." Elena didn't look up. She kept her eyes focused on the floor, trying to avoid the inevitable confrontation. She wasn't here to make waves. She just wanted to survive another day in a place where she didn't belong. But Chad wasn't done. "I didn't think we had any, well, people like you around here." There was a pause, a dangerous silence, and Elena could feel every pair of eyes in the hallway shifting toward her. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. She took a deep breath and stood up, holding her books close to her chest. She met Chad's gaze, refusing to back down. "You don't know anything about me," she said, her voice steady, despite the storm inside. Chad chuckled, stepping even closer, his friends watching with eager eyes. "You're right," he said. "I don't know you, but I'm about to." With that, he reached out and gave her shoulder a shove, just enough to make her stumble. But Elena didn't fall. She steadied herself, her heart pounding, her hands clenched at her sides. Every part of her wanted to push back, to shout, to fight. But she didn't. Not yet. Instead, she lifted her chin and stared him down. "You think pushing me around makes you tough," she said, her voice soft but sharp, like a razor hidden in velvet. "I don't need to fight you. But if you keep this up, you'll fight yourself. And that's the last thing you want." Chad's smirk faltered, just for a split second, but he quickly regained his composure. "Yeah, sure," he scoffed. "We'll see about that." And just like that, the moment was over. He turned and walked off, his group of friends following behind, but not without throwing one last look back at Elena. As the hallway returned to its usual noise, Elena stood frozen for a second longer, the weight of the encounter settling in. She knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But she was ready. The days that followed were nothing like Elena had hoped for. The initial confrontation with Chad only marked the beginning of what would quickly become an unbearable war for her sanity. It started with small things, her locker vandalized with crude doodles, a few mocking notes slipped between the pages of her textbooks, and then the insults. Oh, the insults. Each one hit harder than the last, as if Chad and his friends were testing the limits of how much she could endure. Elena had learned to keep her head down, to walk with her eyes fixed on the floor, not allowing herself to look anyone in the eye for too long. She had hoped the bullying would taper off, that maybe it would all just blow over. But Chad wasn't one to forget. And Elena, it seemed, was his favorite target now. Every day, she could feel his eyes on her, his presence looming in every hallway, in every class. He had this way of making everything about him. Every time she tried to take a step forward, to just be a normal student, he would make sure to remind her that she didn't belong here. That she was different. One day, as she walked to her next class, Elena noticed a few of Chad's friends hanging around the lockers by the stairwell. As she passed by, one of them, Ryan, stuck his foot out, causing her to trip. Her books scattered once more, and she felt the heat rise to her face, the familiar sting of humiliation. "Whoops, my bad," Ryan said, though his voice betrayed a clear lack of sincerity. Elena stood up quickly, brushing the dirt off her pants, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the eyes of everyone around her, waiting for her to react, waiting for her to fall apart. But she didn't. She didn't let them see it. She didn't let them see how much it hurt. Instead, she picked up her books with as much composure as she could muster, giving Ryan nothing but a cold glance before walking away, her mind racing. Why won't they leave me alone? She thought, the frustration building inside her. Why does he need to keep pushing me? It was like a game to him. A game he was determined to win. And as much as Elena wanted to ignore it, she couldn't. There was something about Chad's relentless pursuit that gnawed at her. It wasn't just his cruelty. It was the way he seemed so untouchable. The way everyone followed him, laughed at his jokes, and worshipped the ground he walked on. It wasn't just bullying. It was a power play. And Chad was playing it well. But Elena wasn't stupid. She knew that no bully, no matter how powerful, could maintain their strength forever. And that's what she kept telling herself, she just had to survive long enough for him to slip up. For him to show everyone what he was truly made of. A few days later, Elena found herself in the music room again, alone, just as she had been countless times before. The only place she felt safe, the only place she could shut out the world and just be herself. The keys of the piano were her refuge, each note an escape from the harsh reality she had to face every day. Her fingers moved gracefully over the keys, playing a melody she had composed just for herself. It was a mix of sadness and strength, a reflection of everything she had been through. Every note seemed to tell a story, her story, the one that no one knew, until now. Elena had started composing a song about the bullying. About Chad and the way he made her feel small. But she didn't know what to do with it yet. The idea of confronting him, of standing up and exposing him, seemed impossible. She wasn't sure if she was ready for that battle. But there was something inside her, a flicker of determination, that told her one day she would be. As she played, lost in the music, she didn't notice the shadow standing in the doorway. It wasn't until a voice broke through the soft notes of her piano. "You really think you can just hide in here forever?" Elena's fingers froze on the keys, her body stiffening as she turned to face the source of the voice. It was Chad. He stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame with that all-too-familiar smirk plastered across his face. "I didn't think you'd have the guts to step into this room," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "Are you just going to play your sad little songs and ignore the real world?" Elena didn't speak. She just stared at him, her chest tight, her pulse quickening. She wanted to shout, to scream at him, but she didn't. She knew better. She knew the kind of game he was playing. And she wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Instead, she turned back to the piano and began to play again, louder this time, as if the music could drown him out. She wasn't going to let him break her. Not this time. Chad seemed to pause, surprised by her response. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Elena continued to play, her fingers flying over the keys with the raw emotion she had been hiding for so long. But then, as if the tension in the room had reached its peak, Chad pushed off the doorframe and took a step forward. "Don't you get it?" he said, his voice now cold and calculated. "You're nothing. You're just the new girl who thinks she's too good for this school. Too good for people like me." His words were sharp, cutting, but Elena didn't let them in. She wasn't going to let him win. Not this time. I'm not trying to be anything, she said quietly, her voice steady. I'm just trying to survive. Chad's eyes narrowed, and for a brief moment, Elena saw something in his gaze, something almost like uncertainty. But before she could dwell on it, he sneered. Well, enjoy your little song, princess, he spat. But remember, you're nothing without me. And with that, he turned and left, leaving Elena alone once again with her music. Elena let out a long breath, the weight of the confrontation lifting from her shoulders, but only slightly. She knew this wasn't over. It couldn't be. But she had made it through another round. And that was enough for now. As her fingers found the keys once more, she began to play louder, more forcefully, as if each note was a declaration to herself. I'm not backing down. It had been nearly 2 weeks since the last confrontation with Chad in the music room. Elena kept to herself, working hard to stay invisible. Every day, the stress of the bullying weighed on her, but the music, the piano, kept her grounded. It was her only escape, the only place where she didn't have to be the new girl or the target. But even in the safe silence of the music room, Elena couldn't shake the feeling of being hunted. Every time she stepped into the hallway, she could feel Chad's eyes on her. His presence loomed like a shadow, reminding her of the target she had become on his back. Yet, Elena wasn't afraid. Not anymore. At least, that's what she told herself. The next day, she entered the cafeteria and immediately felt the shift. The usual chatter of students around her stopped, and she could feel the weight of 100 eyes trained on her. The whispers. The sneers. The snickers. Here comes the weird girl, she overheard one of Chad's friends whisper. Elena didn't flinch. She didn't give them the satisfaction of a reaction. She just kept walking, focusing on her lunch tray, trying her best to ignore the looks. She had come to expect this. It was the price of being different, the cost of not fitting into the mold. But as she neared the table where Chad sat with his usual crew, one of them, Jake, deliberately stuck out his foot to trip her. This time, Elena didn't stumble. She caught herself, just as she had in the hallway. But it didn't stop the laughter that followed. Chad's voice cut through the air, louder than anyone else's. Nice try, freak, he sneered, his words ringing in Elena's ears. Her stomach twisted. She clenched her jaw and forced herself to keep walking, refusing to engage. She made it to her usual seat at the far corner of the cafeteria, where she usually ate alone. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she refused to show it. She could hear the laughter continue, but she didn't give them the satisfaction of reacting. She was tired of feeling like a punching bag. Tired of letting them get to her. Why don't you just fight back? A voice whispered in the back of her mind. Elena clenched her fists under the table. The urge to fight, to stand up for herself, was almost overwhelming. But then she remembered her piano. Her music. She couldn't let them see her break. She had to keep her head down. Keep moving forward. That's what she told herself, anyway. Later that afternoon, Elena was sitting alone in the music room, letting the keys of the piano soothe her nerves, when the door swung open. She didn't even need to look up to know who it was. Chad. His footsteps were heavy, deliberate, as if he had something important to say. But Elena wasn't in the mood to deal with him. She kept her fingers moving over the keys, pretending he wasn't there. Do you seriously think you can just hide in here all the time? Chad's voice was colder than usual. Elena didn't respond. She kept playing, her fingers moving smoothly across the piano. The music was her shield, and for a moment, it felt like everything else faded away. But Chad wasn't done. He stepped closer, his presence looming over her like a storm cloud. You think you're better than everyone else, don't you? His voice was taunting, but there was something different in it this time, something almost uncertain. Elena finally stopped playing and looked up at him, meeting his gaze for the first time in days. There was no anger in her eyes, only calm. Her heart was still racing, but she didn't show it. "No," she said quietly, her voice steady. "I don't think I'm better than anyone. I just think I'm different." Chad's eyes narrowed, as if he hadn't expected that response. He took another step forward, his jaw clenched. "Different doesn't always mean better, you know. Different means you don't fit in. And people like you don't belong here." Elena didn't flinch. She didn't back down. "Maybe not. But that's not your decision to make." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence hung heavy between them, filled only by the soft hum of the piano. Chad looked as if he were about to say something else, but then he seemed to reconsider. He turned on his heel and walked out of the room, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Elena let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed them back on the keys, resuming the song she had been playing. "Different doesn't mean I'm less than you," she thought, each note a quiet rebellion against the world Chad had tried to build around her. As the final chord of her song rang out, Elena realized something. Chad was just another bully, another loud voice in the crowd. He didn't have the power to define her. She would define herself, on her own terms. That evening, as Elena sat at her desk in her room, a message popped up on her phone. It was from an unknown number. "Meet me after school. I know what you're going through." Elena's fingers hovered over the screen, uncertainty gnawing at her. She didn't know who it was, but something about the message felt genuine. It was a lifeline in a world where everything else felt like a battle. Could this be my chance? Elena wondered. But then, another thought crossed her mind. What if it's a trap? What if it's just another game from Chad and his friends? She stared at the message for a long time, torn between caution and curiosity. But in the end, one thing was certain, the fight was far from over. The next day, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. After receiving that mysterious message the night before, she found herself torn between curiosity and fear. Was this some kind of prank? Or was someone finally reaching out to her, offering a way out of the nightmare she'd been living? She decided to meet the person. If it turned out to be a trap, at least she'd know for sure. But deep down, Elena hoped it was someone who understood, someone who might be able to help her fight back in a way she hadn't thought of yet. As the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, Elena gathered her things quickly and made her way to the back of the school, the place where the message had told her to meet. Her heart raced with every step, a mix of excitement and anxiety bubbling up inside her. This could be her chance to finally take control of the situation. Or it could be another dead end. When she reached the spot, a shadow moved near the back fence. Elena froze for a moment before stepping forward. "Are you Elena?" a voice called out from the darkness. It was a guy's voice, low and cautious. Elena's breath caught. She squinted into the dim light, finally seeing a figure standing near the edge of the fence. It was a boy, probably a little older than her. His face was partially hidden by the hoodie he wore, but there was something about his posture, confident, yet guarded, that told Elena he wasn't here to hurt her. "Yeah, I'm Elena," she replied, trying to sound calm, though her nerves were clearly getting the best of her. "Who are you?" The boy took a step forward, his hands stuffed in the pockets of his hoodie. "I'm Alex. I'm the one who sent you the message." Elena felt a wave of relief wash over her. She wasn't alone. "I know what you've been going through," Alex continued, his voice steady. "And I think I can help you." Elena felt her guard come down just a little. "You know about Chad, don't you?" Alex nodded. "Yeah. And not just Chad. I've been watching what's been happening with you. I know what he's doing to you, and I don't like it." Elena glanced around nervously, making sure no one else was listening. "But why me? Why reach out to me?" Alex shifted, his expression growing more serious. "Because you're stronger than you think. You've been holding up through all of this, and that's not easy. I see a lot of people in your position who would have cracked by now. But you haven't. Elena's heart skipped a beat. Stronger than she thought. No one had ever told her that before. But it didn't make sense, she hadn't done anything. She'd just been trying to survive. Chad's been a bully for years, Alex continued, his tone darkening. But he's also the one with the most to lose. I know his type. They thrive on fear. They thrive on control. They pick on people they think they can break. But they never expect someone to fight back like you have. Elena swallowed, processing his words. I don't know how to fight back, she said softly. I can't just go up to him and challenge him. I'm not like that. Alex smiled faintly. You don't have to fight him physically. You just have to show him that you're not afraid. That he can't control you. And I think I can help with that. Elena's mind raced. Was this really happening? Could she really stand up to Chad? She hadn't thought about it like that before. The thought of confronting him directly seemed terrifying. But Alex's words felt like a spark, a small glimmer of hope that maybe there was a way out. I've been watching, Alex said, breaking Elena's thoughts. And I think you already have what it takes to stand up to him. You don't need to be the loudest or the toughest. You just need to be smart. Elena felt a knot in her stomach loosen. What do I need to do? Alex's gaze softened, and for a moment, Elena saw something like genuine concern in his eyes. Let's start with this. Tomorrow, don't react to him. Don't let him get to you. I know it's hard, but when he pushes you, just stand still. Don't give him the satisfaction of knowing he's got any control over you. Elena nodded slowly, uncertain but willing to try. And what happens after that? Then we take it from there, Alex said, his tone lightening. I've got a plan. And trust me, when we're done, Chad won't know what hit him. Elena felt a surge of determination. She wasn't sure how exactly it would work, but she knew one thing for sure, she wasn't going to let Chad continue this torment. As she left the meeting spot, she felt lighter. For the first time in weeks, she felt like there might be a way out of this. She wasn't going to let Chad control her anymore. She had someone who was willing to help, someone who knew how to fight back without violence. And for the first time in a long time, Elena was ready to take that step. The next day, the tension between Elena and Chad was more palpable than ever. He had been watching her, circling like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. But Elena had a plan. She wasn't going to let him win. And when he finally did approach her, his usual smug smile on his face, she stood her ground. Chad leaned against the locker, his friends in tow. What's up, freak? Still hiding in the music room, he jeered. Elena didn't flinch. She didn't respond. She simply locked eyes with him, unblinking. For a moment, there was silence. Chad's smirk faltered. It wasn't a loud, dramatic confrontation. It was quiet. Controlled. But it was enough. And for the first time, Elena felt a spark of power in her chest. She didn't need to fight him. She just had to stop letting him control her. Elena woke up the next day with a sense of determination that had been missing for weeks. The previous day's meeting with Alex had sparked something inside her, an understanding that she didn't have to fight Chad physically to stand her ground. No more waiting for him to get the better of her. Today, she would put everything she had learned into practice. She walked into school, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her head held a little higher than usual. The usual whispers followed her, but today, it was different. She had made the decision. Today, she would change the dynamic. And it started with how she walked through these halls. As she stepped into the cafeteria, she immediately spotted Chad and his group of friends at their usual table. He was laughing loudly, leaning back in his chair, clearly the center of attention. The moment he saw her, his smirk appeared, and his friends started to snicker. "Hey, look, the freak's here," Chad called out, his voice carrying over the crowded room. Normally, Elena would have shrunk back, maybe tried to find a seat in the farthest corner. But not today. Today, she did something different. She didn't flinch. She didn't look down. Instead, she met his gaze, calm, composed, and unblinking. For a brief moment, Chad's smile faltered. He looked taken aback, his eyes narrowing as if trying to read her. She could see it in his face, he wasn't used to her not reacting. He expected her to show fear, to cower. But she didn't. Elena calmly walked to the food line, picked up her tray, and made her way to her usual seat in the back. As she sat down, she could feel the weight of Chad's gaze on her, but she didn't let it affect her. For the first time, she didn't let his words have power over her. By the end of lunch, she was finishing her food when she caught a glimpse of Alex across the cafeteria. He was leaning against the door, watching her. There was a slight nod of approval as their eyes met. Elena had done it, she hadn't let Chad control her, hadn't given him the satisfaction of a reaction. Later that afternoon, Elena was walking to the music room when she heard footsteps behind her. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. "Chad. I see you're ignoring me now, huh?" Chad's voice was sharp, but there was an edge to it that wasn't there before. "You think you're so much better than everyone, don't you?" Elena stopped walking, her back straight. She didn't turn to face him, but she could feel his presence looming behind her. "I don't think I'm better than you," Elena replied calmly, her voice steady. "But I'm definitely not afraid of you anymore." Chad paused, clearly thrown off by her calmness. He took a step forward, trying to close the distance. "What are you going to do about it?" he sneered. "You can't just ignore me forever." Elena finally turned to face him. Her eyes were calm, but there was strength in them that hadn't been there before. "You're right. I can't ignore you forever," she said. "But I don't have to let you control me. And that's exactly what you've been doing." For a moment, there was silence. Chad stood there, his eyes searching her face, as if trying to figure out if she was bluffing. Elena wasn't backing down. She was letting the silence speak for her. She wasn't playing his game anymore. The power had shifted. She could feel it. Chad's smirk faded. He didn't say anything else. He simply turned and walked away, his friends following closely behind. Elena watched them leave, but she didn't feel relief, she felt strength. She had faced him down without raising her voice, without a single word of aggression. And in doing so, she had taken away his power. That afternoon, when she returned home, Elena went straight to her piano. She needed to process what had just happened. The weight of the past few weeks, the fear, the frustration, all of it started to pour out in the form of music. Her fingers danced across the keys, the melody filled with all the emotions she hadn't been able to express in words. She played for hours, letting the music carry her. She wasn't just playing for herself anymore, she was playing for every time she had been hurt, every moment she had felt small, every time she had thought she couldn't go on. And with each note, she felt stronger. The next day, as Elena entered school, the dynamic was different. She could still feel the eyes on her, but this time, they weren't filled with judgment. They were filled with curiosity. She didn't know it yet, but the change in her behavior had already started to ripple through the school. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was someone who stood tall, even in the face of bullying. By the end of the week, Elena could feel the shift in the air. Chad's usual bravado seemed to have less effect on her. His comments, which used to hit her like a punch to the gut, now bounced off her like raindrops. And then, on Friday, something unexpected happened. Chad walked up to her after class, his usual entourage behind him. Elena tensed, unsure of what to expect. But when Chad spoke, his tone wasn't mocking. It wasn't taunting. It was different. "I don't know what game you're playing, Elena," he said, his voice quieter than usual, but I don't think you're the same girl you were a few weeks ago. Elena looked him in the eye, her gaze steady. I'm not playing any games, Chad. I'm just living my life. Chad didn't respond right away. Instead, he just stood there for a moment, his face a mix of confusion and something else, maybe even a bit of respect. He turned and walked away, his friends trailing behind him. And for the first time, Elena didn't feel like she had lost anything. She had gained something. Her power. It had been a few days since the tense encounter in the hallway, and the tension between Elena and Chad hung in the air like a storm cloud waiting to burst. To the rest of the school, it seemed like Elena had suddenly become immune to Chad's bullying, but she knew better. She had only just started the battle. Elena's newfound sense of self-control gave her the confidence to walk into school every day with her head held high. Her silence, once a sign of weakness, was now her strength. But she couldn't escape the fact that Chad wasn't the type to give up easily. And it was only a matter of time before he would try to break her down again. It was the middle of the week when it happened. Elena had just finished a late class and was heading to the music room to unwind before she left for the day. She had become used to the hum of the piano strings, the quiet space where she could finally let her mind settle. But as she reached the door, she froze. The door was slightly ajar, and inside, she saw something that made her heart race. Chad was standing there with a group of his friends, laughing. Elena's stomach dropped. What were they doing here? For a moment, she hesitated. Should she turn around and leave? Should she pretend she didn't see them? But then she remembered what Alex had told her. Don't back down. With a deep breath, Elena pushed the door open and walked in. Chad turned around, a mischievous smile spreading across his face when he saw her. Well, if it isn't the music nerd herself, he said, his voice dripping with mockery. Elena didn't respond. She didn't have to. Instead, she walked past him and went straight to the piano, her fingers already hovering above the keys. The room fell silent as Chad's laughter died down. He wasn't used to being ignored. He didn't like it. Think you can just walk in here like you own the place? Chad called out. Elena took a seat at the piano and began to play, her fingers gliding effortlessly over the keys. The sound of the music filled the room, drowning out his words. She was calm, focused. She wasn't going to let him get to her. But as she played, she could feel his eyes on her. He was watching, waiting for her to crack. His friends, too, seemed unsure of how to react to this quiet defiance. Minutes passed. Chad shifted from one foot to the other, clearly frustrated. Finally, he spoke again, his voice much quieter now, though still tinged with the same arrogance. You really think you're special, don't you? Playing that piano and pretending like you're better than everyone else. Elena didn't look up from the keys. She kept playing, the melody taking on a deeper tone. The music was her armor now, her way of telling him that she wasn't afraid of him anymore. Chad huffed, and his friends seemed to share a look, as if they were waiting for him to do something. But he didn't. Instead, he simply turned and left, his group following him. The tension in the room was thick, but Elena didn't let it consume her. She kept playing, letting the music wash away the sting of their presence. When they were gone, Elena took a deep breath, allowing herself a moment of peace. She had won this round. But she knew the war wasn't over. Chad would come at her again. And when he did, she had to be ready. The next day, things took a turn. Chad had been quiet for the last few days. Elena noticed it, but she also knew that quiet didn't mean peace. It meant that he was planning something. And sure enough, the storm hit when she least expected it. During lunch, as Elena was walking to the cafeteria, she noticed a group of students gathered by the lockers. They were whispering, pointing at something. Elena's heart sank when she saw what it was. Her locker. Her locker had been vandalized. Someone had spray-painted crude insults on the metal door, words meant to hurt her, to make her feel small again. She felt a tightness in her chest, a wave of anger and frustration flooding through her. But this time, she didn't react. Not the way they expected. Instead, Elena took a deep breath and walked toward her locker, her eyes scanning the hallway. The students who had been whispering grew quiet as she approached, watching her every move. They were waiting for her to snap, for her to give them the reaction they were looking for. But she didn't. She opened her locker, took out her books, and calmly shut the door. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The students who had gathered around exchanged uneasy glances. They had expected her to break down, to cry, to lash out. But Elena was different now. She had learned how to control her reactions. And in doing so, she had taken away the power they had over her. Elena walked away without a word, her head held high. She knew it wasn't over. She knew Chad wouldn't stop until he had worn her down. But this time, she was ready. She wouldn't give in. Not again. The days after the locker incident were strangely quiet. Elena expected Chad to escalate things, but instead, he seemed to retreat into his usual routine. It was almost as if he were waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. And Elena wasn't sure if that was a good or bad thing. On one hand, she didn't have to deal with his direct attacks. On the other, it meant he was likely planning something worse. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sharp sound, the ring of her phone. It was an unknown number. Elena hesitated, then picked up. "Hello." "Hey, it's Alex," came the voice on the other end. "We need to talk." Elena's heart skipped. Alex had been the one person who seemed to truly understand what she was going through, offering her advice and a sense of hope. But she had a feeling that this call wasn't going to be about advice. "About what?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "It's about Chad. I've been hearing things. I think I found a way to end this for good," Alex said, his voice low and serious. "But you're not going to like how we have to do it." The following afternoon, Elena met Alex after school at their usual spot, the quiet bench behind the school where they could talk without anyone eavesdropping. Her stomach churned as she sat next to him, the weight of the conversation pressing down on her. "What's going on, Alex?" she asked, her voice tight with anticipation. Alex looked around, ensuring no one was listening before he leaned in closer. "I've been digging. Chad's not just bullying you. He's done the same to others in the past. And I have proof. Videos. Texts. Things that'll destroy his reputation. If we show the school, if we expose him, it's over for him." Elena's mind raced. Exposing Chad, the thought of it terrified her. She had fought so hard to stay in control, to avoid sinking to his level. But now, she was faced with a choice: keep playing the silent game and let him continue to torment her, or risk everything to end it once and for all. "I don't know," Elena hesitated, feeling conflicted. "What if it makes things worse? What if it backfires?" Alex placed a hand on her shoulder. "You can't keep pretending, Elena. You fought this far without giving him the reaction he wants. But this is bigger. If we expose him, it's the end of his reign of terror. Not just for you, but for everyone else he's hurt." Elena took a deep breath, her fingers clenched into fists. She thought about all the pain, the humiliation, and how much Chad had taken from her. But could she really do it? Could she really expose him? "You're right," she said finally, her voice steady. "Let's do it." The next day, Elena made her decision. She and Alex carefully collected the evidence: Chad's cruel messages, the videos showing him bullying other students, and the countless instances where he had manipulated people into doing his bidding. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone he had harmed. That afternoon, they went to the school's principal, Mrs. Henderson, and presented the evidence. Her expression darkened as she went through the files, her eyes widening with each piece of information. This is serious," she said, looking up at Elena and Alex. I'll handle this immediately. You've done the right thing, Elena. Elena nodded, but her heart was pounding. There was no going back now. Once the truth came out, Chad would have nowhere to hide. The next day, the news spread like wildfire across the school. Mrs. Henderson had called an emergency assembly to address the situation. Elena sat in the back of the gym, her hands shaking as she waited. The murmurs of the students filled the air, but she couldn't make out any individual voices. When the assembly began, the principal stood before the school, her voice loud and clear. "Students, I want to address a serious issue that has come to light," Mrs. Henderson began. "We have been made aware of certain actions and behaviors that go against the values of our school. After investigating the matter, we have discovered evidence of bullying and harassment, including both physical and online abuse. These actions are unacceptable." Elena felt her breath catch in her throat. She could see Chad sitting at the front of the gym, his expression hard as stone. His friends around him seemed uneasy, the laughter and jokes silenced by the weight of the principal's words. "Effective immediately, Chad Walker will be suspended pending further investigation," Mrs. Henderson announced. The gym erupted into whispers, some students exchanging glances, others nodding in approval. Elena didn't feel triumphant, though. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about putting an end to the cycle of cruelty and giving everyone who had been hurt by Chad a voice. As the assembly ended, Elena felt a wave of relief wash over her. For the first time in a long time, she felt free. She had stood up to the bully, not with violence, but with truth. And in the end, it was the truth that had set her free. Chad's suspension was the beginning of the end for his reign of terror at Rainier High. The whispers of his misdeeds became the topic of conversation in every classroom, every hallway. No one was laughing anymore. No one was afraid of him. As for Elena, she didn't need the approval of her classmates to feel validated. She had gained something far more important, her peace. Her courage had carried her through the darkest times, and now, she was finally free. The following weeks weren't without their challenges. Chad didn't take his suspension quietly. He tried to spread rumors, to rally his friends, but it was clear that his power had crumbled. He had nothing left. Elena had taken away his hold over her, and over everyone else he had tried to manipulate. By the time graduation came around, things had changed. Elena was no longer the quiet, scared girl hiding behind her piano. She was confident, strong, and proud of the person she had become. She had stood up to the bully, not by sinking to his level, but by doing something far more powerful. She had exposed the truth. As she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, Elena felt a sense of accomplishment. She had survived. She had won. And no one, not even Chad Walker, could take that away from her. Elena's journey was one of strength, courage, and transformation. What started as a story of victimhood ended as a triumph over bullying, a powerful message that standing up for yourself doesn't always mean fighting back with fists, it means fighting back with truth, with integrity, and with the knowledge that you are worth more than the hate others try to throw your way.